Happy weekend, peoples. It is July 4th, early morning in your part of the world, and I guess Pacific time, it's still not quite the 4th, but my afternoon here in Asia. Missing the 4th of July with you good peoples and all of our other North American and other Asian friends around the world. All right. So this one's title is 2025 the end of Misty? People are starting to write it off. People are starting to question it. I see titles from other YouTubers and I know they really don't get it. Well, they do know how to attract viewers. Um, most of us YouTubers that have any amount of subscribers use vidIQ. We use other tools. And they're always recommending cute titles. Once in a while, I play around with them. It really comes down to money. If I put something out that's unpopular, even though some of you may love it, I mean, some of you love my stuff that gets my miners, and I didn't build up my base from that. I get 4, 5, 6, 800. I do something on Misty, I get anywhere from 3,000 to 7,000. The bigger YouTubers get 8, 10, 12. So I'm always going to do something on titles that grow me because my time is worth something, right? I don't do this to make a lot of money because I can make that more in trading. So let's get in here. But I said, hey, is 2025 the end of Missy? Made you click, right? Other YouTubers do it. But when I see their material and I look, half of it's accurate, and a lot of them are honest and say, I don't really know. Well, I'm going to dispel some inaccurate conclusions and some non knowing conclusions. And I don't even say conclusions, just comments from other YouTubers out there. So that's the least I can do if I'm doing a video that's similar in title. But again, we're all using that title because it drives people to look. So let's start with just looking over the last 90 days. So is this the end of Misty? Well, depends on how you look and what you look at. So here's MSTR, here's Misty. Doesn't get any more simple than that because, as you know, most of you, Misty writes options. If we're talking Misty with yieldmax, they write a synthetic long, buy, call, sell, put, and then weekly spreads. Not always 100% the same volume of the spreads that they put sell the call, right? So they sell short calls and then they buy long calls, and that gap or that spread is what calls it a bull call spread or, call spread. There's several names, but the idea is you sell the lower price when you want to win that premium, and then to sort of protect yourself on what's known as a covered call, the sell the call short, you buy much higher. Usually in these bigger ones like this, they're $10, $15 strike spreads. And that can leave you hanging. You can run by the call that you sold and still not get to your insurance spread. And all it did was cost you some premium. But by having a bigger gap, it doesn't cost you very much. What you sold that lower price strike for that might be 3, 4, 5% out of the money for the week, and then the other one is 10, 12%, that isn't a huge, it is a huge difference. So you don't want to be between those really, because then all you do is lose some on the call that you sold because you run by it and never get to the insurance. I call it insurance, the higher one. All right, enough of options. Let's just get into the data. So here's current pricing right here on MSTR and on Misty. So you can't tell much from there. How about over this last 90 days? What about a gain or a loss? Again, the underlying almost always is going to outperform. And sure enough, Misty is down. Well, you could say, well, why, Bruce? Because it's an income fund. We've paid 508 right there. So add that $5 back in to the fund and you're at 25.97. So you are up, right? Not the same percentage, but you're up maybe 15, 18% if you added that back in, but you're an income fund. So what's the total return when we annualize that? So we come out and say, well, they don't pay a dividend, so they don't have it. We're paying an 82.95% return. So guys, the goat's still the goat. It doesn't need to pay $2, $3, and $4 when it's 20, right? It just needs to pay $1.20 like it's paying, which I think the last yield on 1.238 payment was like 77.05. So I'll get into the rationale on why it's stuck in the 20s and why it's not paying as much as it used to. Even the yield is down some, but let's one step at a time. I want to dispel some other fiction from fact that people might point to. But I want to start with just the facts, ma'am, which is the 90-day basis. So nothing really radically unusual here. You're never going to perform with the underlying because this thing usually is a high flyer. Well, is it a high flyer? Well, let's get into some of that info right now and what drives. We're going to get down to the IV, right? Which is the theta, if you will, it's the premium on the options. So IV stands for implied volatility. And what that really tells you, there's an HV, which is historical, and 30-day IV means based on what it's done and where the options are priced, this is what we estimate them to be over the next 30 days, and hence 30-day implied volatility. So the pricing right now on options, if you go out a month and you want to sell a call, it's going to match roughly what the 30-day IV is. But let's just start with the baseline here. So Misty's been around 18 months, something. I'm going to give you house money. I'm going to give you every stat you ever wanted to know about Misty. But I'm also going to tell you some things that you may have seen on other channels that partial truths, partial accuracy, or they just don't know, right? Not calling anybody out. Nobody's done anything bad. Nobody's deceived anybody. Okay. So notice the September to mid November. I've got it in green, right? So you're looking at a 1 year chart and you see this huge run up, kind of a bottom here, September. Well, what happened during that time geopolitically? What's going on in the world? What's going on in the stock market? Well, we were in a major presidential cycle, right? We had one former president who dropped out during this period of time. We had another candidate come in. We had a candidate that was labeled a criminal, and I'm not getting into any politics. I'm just restating some things. So I really don't care about the politics side of it. But it's a very traumatic time, and then the person that wins that takes office. And you had people pandering to the crypto community and saying, "Hey, I support this and that," and so forth. And it's been a pretty good environment for crypto with regulations and some of the acts that are in place right now. But having said that, let's look just at history. So you see a big run up here. Well, this is pretty pathetic, but pretty normal for a high yield income fund that's not leveraged, right? This is where your IMSTs, your Roundhill, if they roll theirs out, this is where MST, certainly from Defiant, when we really run, should do pretty well, should do better than the current methodology of yieldmax and Misty. But that remains to be seen. Jay, in a recent interview, talked specifically about NVIDIA. He recalled that they did it for NVIDIA and MST. Why? But they haven't deployed the tactic. What is that tactic? So that they can have leverage, it gives them the ability to use swaps. Then they can sell their calls, they can sell puts, they can change some of that. But the idea is utilizing swaps gives you the ability to stack up 125%, 150, 175, or 200%. Otherwise, it's probably the same game of selling spreads. Okay. So, what do you see in this chart? Well, you see this big run up, and then, you could call this a bull flag. Well, I've got some other labeling down here. I'm going to do it. So here we run up. What's this? I mean, look at the volume when it ran up. I mean, you got two moves up here that are higher. You haven't been up. You had one little burst for a day. This is some sustained volume here. And then you probably had a topping. That looks like it's coming back down. So pretty flat, even though you've moved up some here. And as you notice, Misty can't keep up with that. Not with 100% yield payouts, 80% yield payouts. Now I could get in and give you every little payout and all that, but I don't think that's going to solve it necessarily for you. It's still paying quite a bit for a $20 stock, sometimes a $21 stock. Again, now if this thing drops to 15 and it further pays you 60 cents, well, 60 cents on 15 isn't all that bad. But now you can buy a $6 stock in Ulti and get 9 cents a week. So you're effectively getting 36, 38 cents because there's really 4.3 weeks in a month, because you have to multiply it by 52 to get the real yield, and then you back that across a month. So usually I use a 4.3 multiplier of what they pay on an average week. But so be it. So Misty needs to have MSTR moving up to truly perform. That's pretty obvious, because look at what it did. It went up, you know, 100%. It went up, well, 75%. It went up from this, minus 30. That's the problem when you do these comparison charts. You can't use a price scale, right? But if I had the individual charts, you'd see. And this is probably, actually, I should pull that up somewhere over here and talk about it. If I look at that on Misty, it's probably, a 75% run. Yeah, I have it here. Looking at September, it looks like we were down below 20, but let's call it 20. And then we ran into November just in a single day over 45. And we had a couple of days of up around 42. So this is, 42. This is 20. So we doubled. Okay. Basically, we doubled in that period. And this guy went up 300%, right? He went up from 0 to 300%. And that's not uncommon, capturing a third, maybe 35%. So these are not designed for flat environments, right? Staying in 21 or 22 for month after month after month after month, your IV is going to drop. So let's talk about that IV. So that premium you can earn. So here's a 9-month chart of the 30-day IV, which is exactly what we want to look at. So we go back in to mid-March and we say, oh, okay, well, we're up a little over 100. Now, we did have a spike, a couple of day spike here that probably corresponds, because that's mid-April, earlier April. Yeah, that's this run right here when it started to move, because it moved up almost 100% from here to just anywhere along here, right? So it's at 75 and all of a sudden it's at 175. So, but you don't, I mean, you see a little movement here. It's not like it didn't have any, but it's all contained within about 25%. Again, it's a third. But what did you end up with? Look at this. We bottomed around July 1st at below 50. We're still below 50. And that's unusual, right? You had some over here. Again, it's only a 9-month chart. You have to be a premium member to get, a year plus, but that's all right. This works for what we got. So it's gone from 100% to under 50. So it's less than ideal, guys. Am I concerned? And then other factors are out there? No, not in the slightest. Okay. How about insider sales of MSTR? I read that somewhere. I don't think too much of executives selling some shares since their incentive packages have low priced options that they have to exercise. So, as an example, I had them and I wasn't even a senior executive, right? If you're in a big enough company and you're an important enough contributor, you will get incentive options in management. And the top guys get even cheaper and larger percentage of these things. So you might have a 3-year option package and the stock might be, I'll make it up, the stock's at $200, make a round number. And you'll be able to buy the stock anything over, say, $80. Well, you're already in the money when you get it. And so you have to choose as you move toward that being exercised. Okay, that's gone now, or it's going away. Well, the stock's at $400. So you're going to make that difference, whatever the setup is, however they were incentivizing you. And all top executives and usually board members get these incentives. So when somebody says, oh, XYZ on the board or the CFO or the CEO sold a bunch of shares, that doesn't mean anything. It really doesn't, because you don't know what their incentive option volume was. And look, if I have to exercise that option because it's going away and I pay $20, $50, $70 and I get a $400 stock handed to me, okay, that's sweet. Well, guess what? That just said I have to tax account for that. That's going to come up at the end of the year as a gain. So what do you do oftentimes, and or especially when it's a fair amount? Well, you sell shares. So maybe you go sell 25% or 15% or whatever, just so you have the money to pay the taxes. So I call that prudent management. And it's also prudent to trim some when, somebody's a CEO or a director level or a CFO or senior VP of sales or some other, operations executive. um, you want to not have 90% of your wealth in a single entity. That's just common sense. We all, experienced investors do the same thing. So I didn't see anything when I go out and look at insider sales that triggered in the least bit when I looked at the raw data any concern whatsoever. I'd tell you if I did. All right. So how about another factor? Is Misty the GOAT? Yeah. Is Misty still the GOAT? Yeah. Are there some challengers coming up? You betcha. Pulte comes to mind. But until it knocks off Misty, until it accomplishes what Misty did, Misty's still the GOAT. I'm not in the least bit worried. I don't own more of Misty than I do of some other things, but that had nothing to do with it. There was a time that I was pulling over 20,000 a month income from Misty. I had a large position in Misty. And I also had a large position in Coney at the time. And those two together were contributing about 40,000 a month. I subsequently, though, with the volatility and other things, took that income for a while and said, look out below. I didn't trust it going forward. I have a little more confidence in that, but the real truth is the taxation that that created. It's one thing to have that in a Roth or in an IRA, but I'm already at the level where I have to take RMDs, required minimum distributions, whatever the R stands for, but I know what it is. I have to pull money out because of an age thing. So there are other competitors, but there's nothing wrong with Misty. As a matter of fact, I'll go in and tell you where I think it's headed. I'll go out on a limb there. So, in my opinion, Misty is still the GOAT, and it's in a cup and handle that projects much higher, peoples. It's also very likely to be included in the S&P 500. We shall see. All right. Here's a chart. This one's back from surreynotes.com. It's a 610, but nothing's really changed. You know, do you move up and down in the handle formation? What's breakout 404? Well, where are we right now? 403. We've been above it, at least I think. I have it. I look on my other monitor. Yeah, I got 403.99 we closed at on the July 3rd shortened day. So what is this? What's a cup and handle for those of you that aren't fully in technical analysis? Well, it's a chart pattern. You can see it like a cup of coffee with a handle. And some people, when it's real distinguished, where you have a single bottom and then you have a right and left shoulder, we'll call it an inverse head and shoulders. Because if you have a head up here that's the top and shoulders, then that's a downturn pattern, right? And inverse. So it's really more of a cup and handle. Okay. And so the longer the handle goes, the higher you typically go, but it's reasonable to have that. Well, we're still in the handle mode, but we're right here, right? We broke above it, but that's not a very long handle. Does it work that way? I've seen handles like that take off. So that spells a minimum rise, okay, of 42%. It projects up to 577. So how do you get that, Bruce? Well, you go back and you measure the bottom of the cup and you measure the top. So if we use 404 and 231, it says that we project 173 up from 404. So that, when I do the math, that gives me 577. What is that as a percentage rise? It's 42, almost 43%. Now, some things have to fall in place. What drives MSTR? Typically, it's BTC. All right. So what do we get? Let's do something over here. Let's multiply. What are we at? 109,000 last I looked. 155. Well, I kind of see my target is 168 to 180 on the next big. When we finish, we go through 112 and we start to confirm and have weekly closes and a monthly close, I project us up there. So this is kind of saying if they did a 1-for-1, and sometimes MSTR outperforms BTC, and sometimes BTC outperforms MSTR. That's why I'll throw IMST. I didn't in this one, but I could have very easily included, right? IBIT, because that is a closer BTC correlation, and then look for it. But I don't want to inundate you guys with too much data, right? And here you can casually peruse this, and you kind of see things like the reason I call it the GOAT. It was the shortest period of time. It only took 8.43 months, okay, to get all the money back from its launch. It launched at 21.19 was the close price on the first trading day. So it took it all of 8.43 months to get all that money paid back. I know guys will say, well, I didn't buy it at 21. I bought it at 25. Do your own do your own assessment, guys. You're on your own for that. I got to pick something. It's easier for me to get the close price. Okay. And work off of that. And that's what I do for everybody. So there's only 3 funds in the yieldmax family that's done that. And nobody else has done it in most of the other funds, unless you went and found some BlackRock that's been, you know, trading for 17 years or something like that. But I'm really talking these newer, really high yield funds. So enough on that. Let me wrap this up. So let's look. So that's pretty good. So if BTC runs to 170, which I think is very likely and a good breakout, then we probably will run higher. But remember, a cup and a handle often project a minimum. You can sort of expect the minimum run. So I'm bullish, right? Do I know when that run's going to start? Is it next week? Is it 2 months? Is it 3 months? I think it's likely in 2025. We shall see. I also think silver and gold run in the month of July here. And then I think all hell could break loose in August. So we need to see if it's a store of wealth, a safety valve, okay, for war, for other things that are heating up and all the geopolitical tension. We shall see. I think that BTC as a digital gold should accomplish that, as shown flashes of it, but I also see it trading a lot of times with the NASDAQ and with the tech sector. And I'd like to see it as that store of wealth, as that digital currency, as that alternative to paper money, which it should be, just like gold can be and is. All right, final. Here's just some repeats from other looks. Here's MSTR, here's Msty, here's IMST, here's MSII from Rex, Bitwise, yieldmax. Even Defiance is highly leveraged MST, which is at a lot of NAV erosion, but can really run when BTC runs. So how do we stack up? Pretty good. I mean, it's not like Msty. You got MSTR with a total return. Now, these vary, guys. I made these 327 because you've got 4, 5, and 6 here. These other funds are newer. There aren't that many long track record MSTRs, and there'll be a lot more of these probably because Misty's been such a goat and become so popular. As I said, it's like 34% of yieldmax's total assets under management. So when you have a super popular fund, you have a lot of mimickers, right? Just like Roundhill got a lot when they went weekly on index funds. And then they started rolling out their single stock funds, and they're causing yieldmax, and they're causing Neos, and a lot amplify. They're causing a lot of other people to modify their behavior because it gets people attention. Everybody wants some of that. So I'm not going to go into every one of these. I've talked enough. They're on the screen. Take a look at them. Most of them are you are familiar with what the data means. All right, guys. So the net result is Misty dead for 2025? In my humble opinion, absolutely not. It's the same old Misty that's suffering through some poor IV and reasonably flat trading in MSTR at this time, and also fairly flat. We've been in a range of BTC trading from 90s to 109. That needs to break out. We need to get above 112 and verify with some consistent closes, right? All right, guys, that's what I got. Have a great 4th holiday weekend for those American that I know and grew up and love, but really for all of you around the world. I wish the best to each and all of you. And with that, I will say bye for now. This is not financial advice. I'm not a financial advisor. Bye, peoples.